Welcome back, and I'm joined now by Mark Lagon from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. He was an ambassador at large at the U.S. State Department. But before I go to the live interview, let's take a look at this video first.
Ever since he was elected as the next president of the United States, Donald Trump has been giving out mixed messages to China. He appointed a pro-China ambassador to Beijing, but an anti-China trade advisor. Trump himself turned over many of the efforts that Barack Obama had built with Beijing, and publicly questioned the One China policy after taking a call from Taiwan leader Tsai Ing-wen.
I fully understand the One China policy, but I don't know why we have to be bound by a One China policy unless we make a deal with China.
And their devastating currency.
On trade and economy, Mr. Trump blamed China for job losses, accused China of manipulating its currency, and criticised it for its trade practices. On the South China Sea, Trump is calling on China to keep the sea as an international waterway, rather than China's own territory, saying he supports the Philippines' original claim. And in the latest friction, after China captured a US underwater drone in the South China Sea, Mr. Trump said on Twitter that we should tell China that we don't want the drone they stole back, and suggested that China should keep it. Of course, it's still another 3 weeks away until Donald Trump takes office. And the world is watching and waiting to see what will happen after that in this up-and-down relationship between the two economic powerhouses.
And let's cross over live to my guest in Washington, D.C., Mark Lagon. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us on the very first edition of The Point.
It's a privilege.
Thank you very much. Now, you must have seen what we were talking about a little bit, the conflicting signs that
Yes.
the Trump team has been sending in terms of relations between China and the United States. Many people here in China are confused about these choices for his future cabinet. We don't know whether Congress will approve them, but so far it's unsettling. What do you think are the true motivations behind these appointments? Do you see his actions as personal or policy-driven?
It's a very good question. I think that there is a certain erratic and inconsistent quality to Mr. Trump's statements, but the one thing that the Chinese people and leadership should expect is a kind of consistency on trade, on currency, on economic issues. I think that's probably the wrong emphasis and the wrong priority by the President-elect Trump. The choice of Peter Navarro to head the National Trade Council represents actually a fundamental emphasis of Trump in his campaign and for his voters. Concern about economic affairs in the United States and how China is an effective competitor. The choice of Terry Branstad is more personal for Trump. It is a choice of a governor in a state where he was successful politically, and as someone Branstad, who knows President Xi and knows China well, I think Trump sees him as an asset for deal making, because Trump is ultimately a deal maker.
Well, I would like to hear more about your comments on the appointment of Peter Navarro. We talked about this early in the program as well. Peter wrote books, and he also made this documentary called Death by China. I watched this documentary, and it's very sensational. I mean, it's very alarming, and the rhetoric used is also very attention-catching. And he is putting the blame of U.S.'s economic woes squarely on China. How do you think his appointment is going to affect bilateral trade with China?
Well, I don't think Navarro's appointment is going to be the issue. It's the fact that of the few things that you could expect a President Trump to be consistent on, the economic message with respect to China and its policies is probably going to be something that it stays consistent. I hope that security issues and even more issues of governance, basic liberties will be more of the part of our dialogue. But I think that you should expect tough talk and tough action by the United States on trade relations and on currency, because Trump has so consistently emphasized that as part of his mandate for being elected.
Yeah, well, one of the accusation that China stole jobs from the United States, isn't that a bit simplistic? I mean, the loss of jobs for blue-collar workers has been there for years, and a lot of the jobs have also moved to cheaper labor and better infrastructure places. So shouldn't the U.S. be looking for solutions at home rather than finding a scapegoat?
Well, I think that it is silly to assume that manufacturing jobs that have been disappearing in the United States will be recreated. The United States is becoming strong economically in different ways, with different kinds of service jobs, different kinds of high-end information technology jobs. Education is one of the solutions that's necessary. But I do think you should expect that scapegoating, that emphasis on China eating the United States lunch, as the idiom goes in the United States, will continue. One, it's very important to Trump and his voters. Two, Trump has a tendency to emphasize those economic issues even more than the security issues or the issues of human rights. Three, Mexico as a scapegoat will be even harder to change with the simplistic idea of a wall, which will probably never be built. And fourth, I think you should expect an emphasis on China because Trump is less inclined to treat Russia as a major great power rival of the United States than President Obama did. And so China will be a focus.
Yeah, that's why we're choosing Sino-US relations as the topic of the very first show of this program. Finally, how concerned or how are you looking forward to the future when Trump walks into the White House in just less than 20 days?
Thanks for asking. Well, I'm a little concerned that he may not be very strategic and that he is rather transactional. I think that you're not going to hear as much from President Trump, from my perspective, about basic values of freedom that will ultimately be important for the United States. With respect to Trump's policy towards China, I think actually it will be good that clear statements of American concerns about fundamental issues in our relationship will come from Trump. Republican presidents tend to be clearer, and I think that China's sophisticated leadership will understand that. The transactional quality of Trump is not so good. And the most troubling part of the quote that you indicated in your film earlier about his discussions with the leader of Taiwan is not recognizing democracy on the island of Taiwan. It is that he would want to make a deal over currency or trade and treat these issues as bargaining chips. He will emphasize economic issues, then security issues, then issues of governance and liberties. I think he should do the reverse. Ultimately, the American people will be concerned.
Well, yes. Well, previous U.S. presidents have tried that and they didn't succeed. And we're going to see the same result, I can assure you, Mark. Thank you very much. Time is limited. Mark Lagon joining us from Georgetown University from Washington. You're watching The Point here on CGTN. We'll take a short break and my last point is coming right up. Don't go away.